Pamphilova proposed the reform of the electoral system, the ugliest embodiment of the idea of self-government. The Secheks discussed the principles of improvement of the election procedure. Innovations in the election law, the need for which the head of the Central Election Commission Ella Pamphilova spoke for so long, were announced on Wednesday. Among the reforms she proposes are a change in the procedure for collecting citizens' signatures in support of the nomination of candidates, a new procedure for the appointment of election observers, and the strengthening of the role of the Central Election Commission in conducting elections at all levels, including municipal ones. Pamphilova spoke about the direction in which electoral norms should be reformed at an enlarged meeting of the Scientific and Expert Council of the Secheks, where representatives of leading political parties, public organizations, political scientists and experts were invited. Some of them probably were slightly disappointed to hear from the Secheks chairman that there could be no cardinal reform of the electoral law today, since these laws stem from the general vector of the political process, which no one seems to be going to change. In addition, issues such as the election of mayors and governors, a majority, proportional or mixed election system are outside the competence of the Secheks. Nevertheless, Pamphilova agrees that in the field of electoral legislation, hot problems have ripened that need to be addressed regardless of political issues. The Central Election Commission comes up with framework proposals. This is, first of all, the procedure for collecting and verifying signatures. Pamphilova is sure that the current mechanism is too complicated, it creates the conditions for arbitrariness. Since the adoption of this norm, society has changed, even entry to the porches is complicated, but internet access is becoming almost popular. In order to make the procedure for collecting signatures as convenient as possible for citizens, it is worth considering creating special rooms where voters can come and leave their signatures, without being afraid that their personal data will go away somewhere, says Ella Pamphilova. From her point of view, it is even more important to maximize the use of the public services portal, with which you can collect part of the signatures. It is possible that there will be a return to the practice of making an election deposit. But the amount of information about voters should be reduced. The notorious municipal filter needs to be adjusted so that real competitors are not cut off, only crime is cut off, as well as urban and rural crazy, the Secheks chairman believes. Pamphilova notes that a similar filter exists in many countries, but in Russia it is the highest and should be reduced. Ella Pamphilova proposes that election observers be appointed without prior notice. From her point of view, municipal elections are a very acute issue. Summing up the brief results of the 2019 election campaign, the head of the Central Election Commission emphasized that the municipal campaign in St. Petersburg was the hotspot. Of the 184 lawsuits filed by participants in the September elections in 9 regions of the country, 133 relate to local elections in the northern capital, illustrating the ugliest embodiment of the idea of self-government. Probably, such ugliness can be fought with the help of strengthening the vertical of power in the country's electoral system. It literally sounded like this: if the Secheks is asked so harshly, if we are accused of just waving our arms, then we have prepared a number of proposals for a unified, rather than parallel or perpendicular system. Ella Pamphilova invited the panelists to discuss this topic. Recall that last summer Pamphilova was perplexed by the proposal of the Communist Party representatives to dismiss the head of the Moscow City Election Commission, Valentin Gorbanov. The perplexity was not groundless. The heads of regional election commissions are appointed by the regional authorities, and by no means the chairman of the Central Election Commission. In a recent interview, Ella Pamphilova said, "The main message is that if the Secheks is responsible for the entire electoral process in the country, then we must have the authority and the ability to promptly prevent the possibility of abuse. In principle, the Secheks can now insist on its decisions, including personnel, before the regional election commissions. But not directly, but through an expression of mistrust, which may be followed by the voluntary resignation of the fines." Some analysts fear that if the Central Election Commission's vertical of power is strengthened, the role of the administrative resource will increase, the government services portal and the Secheks as the election ministry will increase the ability of the authorities to conduct controlled campaigns. One can object to this. Last summer showed that, as a rule, the grassroots district election commissions mock. It was they who rejected the lion's share of citizens' signatures in support of nominating candidates for the Moscow City Duma and created a number of explosive precedents in the northern capital. Higher commissions, on the other hand, returned unfairly rejected autographs to the candidates, and the Central Election Commission became the champion in this matter. Therefore, at least today, strengthening the vertical of power of the Secheks is not able to increase, but to reduce the number of abuses on the ground. Recall that last summer Pamfilov was perplexed by the proposal of the Communist Party representatives to dismiss the head of the Moscow City Election Commission, Valentin Gorbanov. The perplexity was not groundless. The heads of regional election commissions are appointed by the regional authorities, and by no means the chairman of the Central Election Commission. In a recent interview, Ella Pamfilova said, "The main message is that if the Secheks is responsible for the entire electoral process in the country, then we must have the authority and the ability to promptly prevent the possibility of abuse." In principle, the Secheks can now insist on its decisions, including personnel, before the regional election commissions. But not directly, but through an expression of mistrust, which may be followed by the voluntary resignation of the fines.